I review you, my pretty, and your little dog too. Let's talk about The Wizard of Oz.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're just going to get straight into it. Daniel, may you please let the people know what we're going to be discussing or debating today?
So, this week we are starting a new series where we're trying something a little bit new. We're calling it Catching Up On, in which we go and watch a movie that is an old classic that none of us have seen before, and there's usually some reason for why we want to catch up on this one in particular. This week, we are making the start with The Wizard of Oz from 1939, which none of us have seen. And with Wicked for Good coming out this week, we thought we would catch up on that classic movie that none of us had really seen before. The reason we've not really seen it is that we're all based in Europe. And in Europe, this is not really a movie that is widely seen. It's not taught in schools. It's not shown to children very much. If you've seen it, it's either because you like classic movies or because you've kind of heard of it and you were interested on your own. But it is pretty unusual for people to grow up with this story. And so for us, this is a new story that we'd heard of before. We'd seen the memes, we'd seen the clips, we know what the Yellow Brick Road is and all of that, but we'd never actually seen it from start to finish. So, Jonathan, what's your takeaway from The Wizard of Oz?
Firstly, Daniel, I want to say that was a great intro, and I apologize to. I'm not shitting on your introduction, but I have actually seen this movie before, but it was a long time ago, and it wasn't actually out of my own free will. I did performing arts in high school, and then one of the movies which we had to watch was obviously Wizard of Oz because we had to actually act it out in a theater show, and I played Scarecrow. When I was watching this, I didn't remember majority of the stuff that I was watching. I'll be honest with you. I only remembered mainly the beginning, but everything afterwards I was completely blank. So it felt like I never watched this movie before. So technically speaking, you are kind of right in a way. I'll be honest with you, this kind of felt like nostalgia. It was good nostalgia. Like I said, I had to perform this movie, and I was the Scarecrow, in case you guys are wondering. So whenever the Scarecrow came on stage, I was resonating with his character the most. But overall, I'd say, okay, it's definitely not a film that I would watch out of my own accord. Even after watching it for the second time, I said, okay, yeah, this film isn't for me, because I'm not really a big fan of musicals. The last time I really enjoyed a musical maybe was, actually, I think it was called Praise Him. It was featuring Chloe Bailey. I forgot what it's called, but I think it was called Praise Him. However, that being said, yes, I'm not really like a big fan of musicals. I'll be honest with you, especially how they, what they did with Joker too. Yeah, I'll never forgive that. But yeah, that being said, with this one, it was just a nice memory lane type of film, and it was a nice build up to
Wicked for Good.
yes, Wicked, but yeah, Wicked too. So it was definitely a good build up to that. And it was just like a good, refreshing, just something that was good and refreshing. Because obviously, I didn't know the context of Wicked. I knew that it was based on The Wizard of Oz, but kind of like watching The Wizard of Oz now, it kind of makes you look at Wicked differently in a way. But let's stick to this film. Overall, with this film, I'd say it was just a good, nostalgic experience. In terms of the movie itself, I wouldn't watch it based off my own accord. However, there were moments which I found was cool. There were definitely moments which I found was cool, which we'll talk about more later. But overall, I said I had a okay experience with this one.
Yeah, you kind of hit on something there, which is that when I was watching it, so I really saw it for the first time about 2 days ago. I had seen clips, I knew who the characters were and all of that, but I'd never seen it from start to finish, and it felt nostalgic, even though I'd never seen it, which is a really weird experience because, like, I did not grow up with it. I barely know the story. Like on a very high level, I could summarize the movie, but I didn't know any of the details. This just felt familiar, and it felt like something I'd watched 20, 30 years ago and was being reminded of it, but it was a fresh experience. I also think that it's clear about, why this is such a classic. It's if you look past the nostalgia and past the cultural impact, it's just a well-made movie. Like especially like in the first 5 to 10 minutes, I really got the sense of, yeah, this is just a competent, like this obviously is old, right? This is an like 90-year-old movie, and it's very clearly filmed on a stage, and these are props, these are not real landscapes, but it just looks good, and it looks like the way it's shot, it's clearly very competent, right? Just in terms of how it flows and the dialogue and the sets and all of that, it just feels right in some way, right? So I did overall have a good time with that movie, even though Like there's not very much to really latch on to. Like I didn't care very much for the music, and it's very clearly a children's movie, and there was no actual nostalgia that I could tap into. But overall, I just enjoyed my time with this movie. Was there anything that surprised you? This is maybe not the best question for you because you'd actually seen it, but is it like the way you expected it? Was there anything that stood out as an, or I did not expect it to be like this?
Well, I think even though I've seen it, I'd say you're more you're more knowledgeable of what people are saying because I didn't really know the significance of this film when it comes to just media and film in terms of just like the film industry. I had no idea about it. I do not know about its significance. So in terms of what I expected from the film and what I got from the film, I'd say I understood why it was culturally important in terms of just like the film industry because especially when I saw how the transition from black and white to the vibrant colors when it once they reached Oz, I was like, okay, I can tell. I can probably see how this part maybe was revolutionary because the film came out in 1937, I believe.
In 1939, yeah, that's right.
Oh, 1939. When was color in TV introduced?
Well, in TV, I think that's from the 50s, and I think Technicolor existed since the 1910s. But I think this is comes. I'm not that much of a movie history buff from a technical standpoint. I think at that time some movies were in color and some weren't. So you
Okay.
could have gone either way. Like if you were watching a movie in 1939, I think it could have gone either way.
Okay, cool. So it's just the transition for that to happen in the movie was really cool. I'm like, oh, okay, I can see how the audience reaction back in the day would have been to that as well. But also especially when it comes to like the music, I also recognize Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and I actually forgot that we sung that in the show back in the day. However, I've heard that song everywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? So I was like, oh, okay, so it's from here. So yeah, so when it comes to what I expected from the film, it delivered in terms of why now I understand why the film was so big and obviously why it was big enough for us to do back in the day.
Back then, like when you were doing that theater production, did anybody in your class know what it was, or was it new to everybody?
It was from what I can remember, it was new to most people.
That's interesting. So it was basically just a completely new story that nobody had
Yeah,
any
because
connection to.
yeah, because bearing in mind this, I think we one thing I think I remember that they did know some of the songs, like some of the actors I was acting with, well, students I was acting with, they did recognize some of the songs, especially Over the Rainbow. That's one thing I did remember. I just remembered now. So it had some significance, but we just didn't know. I'm sure most of us just didn't know where that came from.
Okay. All right. Moving into like the movie itself, our angle here is going to be like, what does this look like for somebody who just watches this as a movie with no particular history? What's your takeaway of the story itself? Is it a good story?
I actually thought the story was cool. The only thing that kind of distracted me from the story was so much singing, but it's a musical, so it's something which I can't even blame it for. However, the story itself, I thought it was cool. She was trying to get back home, and obviously the witch was in her way, and obviously she ended up meeting. And obviously, I believe each character that she met from Tin Man to the Lion, I forgot to Scarecrow. Obviously, it was cool that they were all like a representation of specific themes. So I was like, okay, especially with her performance as well. Even though I do have like a pet peeve, it is a pet peeve of me when people act very theatrical. However, with this one, it worked. The reason why I say that is because it was based in 1937, so you'd expect the acting to be like that. Whereas when I'm seeing acting like that now, or for movies in the 90s or early 10s, I'm like, okay, this ain't great. So overall, I enjoyed the performances. There was sometimes it felt like a nice family orientated type of film, and that's exactly what they were trying to do with the movie, and it was good. I liked it. But yeah, there was also a powerful message behind it as well in terms of like recognizing strength. You know what I'm saying? And the qualities within yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? So especially with the song "There's No Place Like Home," I think that was a song, but that was the main
Yeah.
message, and obviously the appreciation of family as well. And sometimes you can take family for granted. So I think that was definitely a good message to show, especially when it comes to kids as well, because a lot of the times we all had this. We all have like an urge to want to grow up fast. So watching that as a kid, I'm sure it would get most of us emotional, and then probably end up giving our parents a hug saying we're never going to leave. But what about you? How did you find the story?
So I was a little bit disoriented as I was first watching it because Dorothy is very much just moving along the plot and she's being led by other characters from one stop to the next, right? And then she doesn't do very much in terms of actually driving the plot, right? Like, yeah, yes, she wants to go back home, and yes, she wants to go to the wizard because she's been told that that's how she can get back home. But other than that, it's very much a moving from one signpost to the next and just experiencing stuff and having adventures along the way. If you view this as like a fantasy movie, there's a bunch that are kind of like this, right? But I think the when it really started to kind of come together is when it became clear that this is not really a heroic story. Like, this is not heroic fiction, in the sense that Dorothy and Scarecrow and Tin Man and the Lion are going to overcome something. This is more about them discovering that they had what they needed all along, right? And that they just had to have experiences that allowed them to recognize this, right? And that is kind of why they don't really need to make big decisions. Like, on paper, this does everything wrong, right? Like, main characters don't really have agencies, and they don't change very much, and they don't make major decisions that impact the plot, and there's not really that much of an obstacle to overcome. Like, there's the witch, but she dies in a very easy and lame way. And so, like, just on paper, this is not a great story, but I think it works because, number one, it's about discovery, right? Where Dorothy experiences Oz just kind of as a tourist and as a visitor. She learns things and experiences things together with us, right? And that is kind of the point of the story, kind of in the first half or two-thirds. And after that, it's about recognizing that the qualities you were looking for, or the price that we're looking for, was something that you could have achieved on your own. You just needed to learn how, and you needed to be pushed to the point where you could achieve that, right? I thought like the scene with the wizard where he kind of hands out these diplomas and the medals. It's kind of hacky and kind of corny, but I think if you grade on a curve and say, okay, this is meant for children, then it kind of makes sense, and it kind of hangs together again. And then it's kind of goes full circle when Dorothy comes home to Kansas, and she kind of starts where she ends up where she started. And this movie commits a really big movie sin, which is that it was all a dream.
Yeah, I was gonna ask as well in terms of how you felt about that trope.
Yeah, so this is another one where on paper I should, like, if I put on my review ahead and start marking cinema sins and whatever, right? Like, this is just not how you do it, right? First of all, the character has not really accomplished very much, and second of all, it wasn't all real, and it was all in her head, and it's not even a big twist, because when she seeks shelter from the tornado in the beginning, and she's in the house alone while I think her aunts and uncles are in the basement in the storm shelter, the evil neighbor who's been going after her dog just outright turns into the wicked witch. Like, it's not even a reveal. It's not even an Easter egg or something like that. It's not something you're supposed to figure out later. It's made clear right from the beginning, and it's shot in a way that makes it very clear what's going on. And honestly, like, this is one of those things that actually surprised me about the movie, because I had always heard this as a fan theory, that people had come up with the theory that this was all a dream, and then there would be like, here's a 40-minute YouTube essay that proves, or that compiles all the clues that this is a dream. No, but this is so obvious. Like, from everything from the actors in the dual roles, to how Dorothy gets to Oz, to her just waking up in the end. Like, it's not ambiguous at all. And it's kind of interesting because this is not in the original story. This was a studio mandate, apparently, from what I've read, where, like, in the original story, Dorothy literally travels to another place and then comes back. And for whatever reason, they thought audiences wouldn't buy that, so they turned it into a dream. So it's not even original, like part of the original story. But just if you just take the movie on its own, it's very obvious. Like, there's no debating it. And almost always, if something was just a dream, that kind of undermines the story, right? Because whatever challenges the character overcame did not really happen. Whatever sacrifices they made, they didn't really make. And I do think that this highlights kind of the one case where it's fine, which is Dorothy's experiences and realizations and insights that she gains through her adventures in Oz are what's real, right? She is changed by that experience, even though she didn't actually go anywhere, and even though none of it really happened. And I think that is the one case where it actually works.
Yeah, I agree because at first, I'll be honest with you, in terms of how I felt about the whole, all a dream. I thought it kind of like lessened the gravity of like the adventure. However, hearing the production's response, or reasoning as to why they turned it into a dream, thinking that the viewers wouldn't believe it, it makes me think, okay, what was the view? Was that like a reflection of how audiences viewed, the whole fantasy genre back in the day. And if it's the case where they were like, well, serious people, then I understand about their decision. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm not too mad at it. At first I was like, oh man. But like I said, I'm not too mad at it. If it's a thing where they thought, okay, it's more sellable to put it in this format, then I'm with it. I'm like, okay, cool, that's cool.
And normally, like these kinds of studio mandates don't make the story better, right? Usually they water it down and they often kind of dilute kind of the point of the story and whatever, right? And everything from making like adding in mandatory romances or mandatory action sequences or something to make to increase a story's mass appeal, it almost always makes the story worse. Where you can very clearly see, okay, here was the good idea, and then we had to pile in other stuff that doesn't really belong, and that just makes the movie less coherent, less specific, less distinctive, and you get something that's more generic. It's like this should be on paper one of those things where it was just a bad idea, and I still don't really see how it makes the story necessarily better. It's just it doesn't kill it is the main thing. But it's kind of interesting where you can like this movie breaks a whole bunch of rules, and obviously in 1939 many of those rules weren't codified, especially for movies, and they just break a bunch of them and it still kind of works. Like if I was just watching this as an adult just by myself, it's not the great like it's not the greatest, right? I can imagine like if I were to rewrite the Wizard of Oz, right, for adults, it would like there would be like Dorothy would have more of an active role and she would contribute more to actually defeating the witch and all of that. But I think just for what it is, I think it works quite well.
Do you think the songs and the score gives it the lifeline that it needs, and kind of like the forgiveness and grace that was shown it in terms of the story itself? Because obviously, this music now has become so memorable, so clearly it must have had some sort of course, it has a positive impact on the film. So that's maybe why our outlook on this movie and majority of people's outlook on this film is positive, rather than, like you said, it should be like a a generic film.
I have no nostalgia for any of it, right? I think Over the Rainbow is a neat song, and all the others are kind of I can kind of take or leave. Like honestly, I tuned out a little bit when some of the musical numbers in the middle were happening
Same,
because I
same.
didn't feel like I'm sure if you really dig into it, they do contribute something, but it just wasn't the part that I really got into. The part that I really got into was just going to the next part of Oz, and first of all encountering the Munchkins, and then going on the Yellow Brick Road and encountering the different companions, and then getting to Oz and how that looks very different from the Munchkin village, and then the wizard, and then the evil forest, and then the castle of the Wicked Witch, and all of that. Right? It's like any good fantasy movie and children's fantasy movie. It's built around a sense of wonder and discovery, where every scene is something new, and the world gets bigger with every scene and with every sequence. And I think this does that absolutely. And I think the music kind of makes it more whimsical and more fairy tale like. Like even in 1939, it's probably the sets were probably not that believable. Like the tornado effect in the beginning is notorious for being breathtaking. A lot of money and effort and technology went into making that work, because it's not just like first of obviously it can't be CGI, right? So they had to make it as a practical effect. And if you read up a little bit on how they did it, I can't even remember all the details now, but it's a massive feat of technological expertise that went into making this tornado look as good as it did. But as you're watching it, it's very clearly a set, right? It's very clearly a soundstage, and none of it looks quite real. And that gets worse when you go into Oz, where everything is very colorful and it looks very plastic, and this is like it's very clearly artificial, made by a prop department. But I think the songs kind of help suspend the disbelief, because it kind of makes it just adds a level of stylization where they're not trying to make it look realistic, they're trying to make it look wondrous. And the music, I think, helps with that, even though I didn't care about the specific songs very much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll agree with that. The music did definitely amplify the whole, fantasy side of things. I too did feel like it caused pacing issues. There were just a lot of songs where it was kind of like dragged out, so it kind of made you not forget the story, but tune out of the story. And I think the story itself could have been more impactful and could have just been better in general with less songs. But I do understand this was more of a theatrical performance on the big screen rather than a movie itself. But also, I wanted to kind of like quickly touch on something, because I was going to ask you a question about the Witch, right? However, which was going to obviously lead into Wicked part two. However, I just want to ask you quickly about the production because you kind of touched on that. Obviously, with its historical context, and obviously when you filled me in a bit on it, I can't lie to you. I watched this film a bit differently. Even though, like I said, I didn't fully remember how what it was like when I watched the film a long time ago. However, I do remember moments, right, bits, like I said, because I had a nostalgic experience with this one. However, I'm sure watching this film, I just viewed this film differently to how I watched it before. Before I even go into it, Daniel, can you explain the historical context behind the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, so you're referring to what a shit show the production of this movie was. So I did read up a little bit on it, and I basically know what the Wikipedia article says, and I've seen some YouTube summaries of what went down, and it's a nightmare. And I like there's no real point in us kind of really going into that much detail here because that's been done before, and we would just summarize what we've read in other places. But just very briefly, just some of the highlights. Judy Garland, who plays Dorothy, was 17 when this was shot. The studio thought she was too overweight to play the role, and so they put her on a caffeine and cigarette diet. They put her on uppers and downers just to kind of keep her functioning throughout the shoot. There's a famous picture where they have a rap party and they are unveiling like a cake, and there's the entire cast in the background. And Judy Garland is just standing there completely spaced out. She's probably not seen a cake or possibly solid food in months. And she's supposed to celebrate, and she's completely shell shocked. Like she's just come home from war. It's crazy.
Scheiße.
Yeah, it's like it's. I mean, I've read like especially like early Hollywood has some wild things in there, but like this just takes the cake. Like I've never if anybody knows a movie that was a worse working environment, I'd be curious to find out because I don't know what can top this. There's a famous story about The Exorcist where the director is kind of doing kind of reverse method acting, where he tried to make things as real for the actors as possible, and that included the main actress being hospitalized because there's a scene where the demon kind of pushes the character, like the mom of Reagan, kind of backwards, and she kind of hits like she just slams into a wall kind of thing. They basically filmed that by kind of attaching a rope to her back, right? She wore like a kind of a harness, and there was a rope attached, and somebody pulled the rope so that she would fly through the room essentially. And she hit her head on a radiator, and they took the take where she hit her head, was dazed, and they just kept rolling while the ambulance was on its way because it was such a genuine performance because she was really in pain and she really got injured. So, and this was in the 70s. This was almost 40 years later than Wizard of Oz. So there's like some notorious stories from film productions about how actors and crew get treated, but the Wizard of Oz just seems to be the high score. It's incredible. So several actors, including the ones who played Tin Man and the Witch, were hospitalized because their makeup poisoned them. It's just outright like just they just outright inhaled aluminum dust in one case, and I think the witch. So there's a scene where after Dorothy arrives in Oz, the Witch of the East has been killed by Dorothy's house, and the Witch of the West shows up and essentially promises revenge, and then she disappears in this orange cloud of smoke. And the way that worked was that there was an elevator kind of built to the floor, and the smoke would go off, and then the actress would get lowered, and then when the smoke cleared, she was gone. Right? Slight problem: her makeup was copper based, which made it flammable. And when the pyrotechnics went off too early, her face caught fire and she was hospitalized for 3 months.
Jesus Christ. Yeah,
Right? So talk about health and safety, right? Like it's like we live in an era where health and safety, like if we notice it, it's because it kind of got a little decadent and it kind of was a little overbearing and it made big deals out of things that aren't really that a big deal. But that exists because of stuff like this, right? Because this is what happens when health and safety and protecting people is not a factor at all. And like this is kind of an interesting kind of window into a time when people when kind of these studios just did whatever they wanted, and outright hospitalizing multiple actors is just is just on another level. It's crazy, and the list kind of goes on like this, right? But this is kind of the like this colorful, whimsical children's story was a complete horror show behind the scenes, right? And it's not even that much of a secret. Like it just goes on like this, right? And we could go an hour, and I'm sure people have talked for hours about all the awful things that went on there. It just boggles the mind about how like the like, it's not just that it was a bad working environment, it was also that it's this contrast to how whimsical and childlike and magical the final product is, and you don't really notice it. When I was like before I'd seen this movie, I'd always heard like stories like there's a like a rumor, which is from what I know not true, that one of the actors who played one of the Munchkins died during production, and their spirit can allegedly be seen in the background in one of the shots, and which is obviously not the case, but there's a reason why people believe it, right? Like if you would believe that any movie set was haunted, it's Wizard of Oz.
For real, for real. But this movie made me look at the Munchkins very differently. That's why my experience, like after just knowing the context of like just the whole production, I was waiting for the Munchkins to see how I feel about them, and it didn't feel great. That's the only moment where I'm like, yeah, I don't like this one because I knew what was really going on behind the scenes with these guys. They weren't as adorable and cute as they were portrayed to be. So no, it was just a whole dumpster fire. And I felt, and by the way, guys, when I'm laughing at this, I'm not laughing actually at what happened to the characters, to the actors, because I felt so sorry for what they were going through. It just sounds ridiculous now because the smallest thing that happens on set now, you could get sued and potentially prosecuted. Do you know what I'm saying? So for productions back in the day to be getting away with what they were getting away with is just crazy. Like, I thought the whole Marilyn Monroe story was bad. This is like, obviously Marilyn Monroe story was bad as well, but this as well, like is up there. Wizard of Oz is definitely up there as a production as a whole.
It is a different world. It was a different time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do you feel like I think it's time we should get into the Wicked Witch? How did you feel about her?
Yeah, I was going to ask, is she a good villain?
I thought she was intense. In this one, so okay. Let me not even speak on Wicked Part 2 yet. But in terms of her character in The Wizard of Oz, I thought she was intense. Her scary nature could have been frightening to very young children, which was like, this is actually no, I'm lying. I think the kids would actually know. Back in the day, though, they were very sensitive. Back in the day, I think you even Danny, I think you even mentioned, I don't remember what year it was, but there was like the moving train scene, and people in the cinema got so scared they ran out or something like that. Where they were gonna get hit by the moving train on the cinema screen.
Yeah, so there's this story about one of the first things shown in theaters. Like this must have been the 1910s. Was just a video of a train coming at the camera, and people freaked out. Like they just ran out of the cinema, and that's because they'd never seen anything like this, right? Like if all your senses are telling you that there's a train coming for you, you will run, right? It's not about actually believing that it's real. Like rationally, all of them probably knew that this was not real, but they just panicked. And it's very rare for us today to have that kind of reaction to it. But yeah, it's like the further back, like when something is new, people don't. And I think, like honestly, I think 10 or 20 years from now, people look at the way we treat AI today, like AI video and stuff like that, or social media, in the same way that we look at the people who were frightened by the train video, because
Yeah,
it's new, we're not used to it, we've not kind of been burnt yet, right? And so our brain can't distinguish between what's real and what isn't in many cases. And that is just like if you're seeing a movie for the first time and it's a train coming at you, you're gonna run, right? That's just how it is. And so a villain like the Wicked Witch kind of hits differently if it's 1939,
yeah,
and especially if you're a child, right? Like I think if you show this to a child today, I think she'll still have a similar impact, even though probably like a 6 year old today is much more jaded and probably has seen other stuff in movies and whatever. But
yeah.
I think for somebody who is not like battle hardened yet from having seen thousands of hours of movies, the witch still has an effect.
Yeah, she does her job. That was actually going to be my point. Was back in the day, because I was contemplating this, but then obviously knowing how the climate of what it was back in the day, I could definitely see the kids being scared by her character. That was probably too. Maybe it might have been too intense for them. So she definitely did do her job. So I think her character was maybe for me where most of my entertainment came from. Of course, she's theatrical and she's over the top, but she just provided that thrill that I think the film needed. So in terms of her character, I liked her. It made me just look at the witch in Wicked 2 with not curiosity, but just questions, because apparently, obviously, Wicked 2. I don't really want to get into it, but Wicked 2, you said, is The Wizard of Oz is what is it? Like not prequel, but it's I know how they link, but I'm not too sure about the timeline.
So most of Wicked is a prequel to this, essentially showing Glinda and the Wicked Witch as teenagers, right? Or as young people. And from what I've read, again, I've not seen the musical, so I don't actually know what happens in part two. But from what I've read, much of part two is kind of concurrent with Wizard of Oz and essentially covers the same ground, but from the witch's point of view, kind of recontextualizing and kind of being kind of a kind of revisionist history is kind of the point of Wicked, right? Yeah, like the idea was you take one of the most beloved villains of cinema that everybody knows, like in the target audience, right? And then you make her the hero, and you just recontextualize everything. Now, I'm a little bit ambivalent about it. I was not wild about Wicked Part One, but that didn't have much to do with kind of the premise. It had more to do with the execution, where I thought a lot of it was very like simplistic and not at all satisfying in how it was laid out. And we'll see if they bring that home in the second part. But the idea is basically that like she's supposed to be the hero of her own story, but not just that, but to actually be the hero. And the main question I have about this is, isn't that already kind of the thing in Wizard of Oz? Not that the Wicked Witch is good, but the wizard is very clearly not that good, right? Like he's a con artist, he's a liar. He almost got Dorothy killed, right? And he was very happy to have her walk into her death in order to get to the witch. And if she had failed, then he would have sent somebody else. You know, like the wizard is already not a hero. So recontextualizing something that is that maybe nuance is the wrong word, but muddled, like or morally ambiguous for a children's story. I don't know. Like I'm not saying it's pointless, but there's a little bit of a question mark here. But you're doing this with a like the reason the Wicked Witch is such a good candidate for this in principle is that she's so over the top and theatrical and just pure evil. Like she has no motivation. Like she's kind of like I would be very surprised if she wasn't an influence on Palpatine in Star Wars, right?
Mm.
Because she's so theatrical and she has no background, she has no motivation, she's just evil and she's just there to cause chaos and to cause harm and to be an antagonist, right? To bring out the best, like literally, like this is literally Star Wars, right? Like the point of the Emperor in Star Wars is to bring out the best in Luke and to tempt him to take the shortcut that his father took for personal power and to get what he wants. And then he is so noble that he refuses him even when he has had every chance to do so, right? Like that's not quite what happens here, but what happens here is that we have a very cartoonish, one-dimensional, larger-than-life villain who basically just exists to give Dorothy a chance, and her three companions a chance to be better than they thought they were. That's the only purpose. The reason it works is because she brings out the best in the heroes. And I think that is one of those things where, like today, we live in an era in which villain motivations are extremely highly regarded. Like we want a tragic backstory, we want childhood trauma, we want villains to be good people who were broken by the system or by life or by society or something, and then we can sympathize with them on some level, while at the same time recognizing that they are bad people. But we find, like generally, just as a culture, we find just evil villains just unsatisfying. And I'm a little bit of a contrarian where I say, no, actually, a villain does not have to be that kind of tragic figure. They don't need to have an elaborate motivation. They just need to be an opponent to the hero, and then something interesting has to happen because of that opposition. And so I think the Wicked Witch is kind of a breath of fresh air, in my opinion, where she's just like I think the story would be more compelling if there was at least a little bit of information about why there are four witches, right, and why two of them are apparently evil. I think the witch, so Glinda is the witch of the north, I think, and there must be one in the south. I'm not sure about the world building of the Wizard of Oz exactly, but why are there four witches in four directions? Why are two of them good and two of them evil? And there's this whole thing where Glinda asks Dorothy if she's good or evil, or if she's an evil witch or a good witch. And obviously that's like tying into this whole idea of perceptions, and that gets mirrored later on with the wizard, where his true nature is not exactly what he presents, and about how change and success come from within and not from without, and all of that, right? So it all kind of ties together in that way, but it's just a weird, and I think that's one of the things that Wicked never explains, I think, why there are four witches, and maybe that will be explained in part two. I don't know, but that's kind of like my one big question about why is that? Like, what's the point? Not just on a story level, but like on in an in universe level. Why do people say, okay, there is a witch of the West? Well, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Did you say you think they're gonna explain that in Wicked Part Two?
At the end of Wicked Part One, Elphaba goes into exile, right? And that is, it seems to me like she would become the Witch of the West in between movies, and then at the beginning of part two, we see her be the Witch of the West, and then at some and Glinda having become the Witch of the North. And I would be surprised if it wasn't mentioned at all what the point of that was. Like, what's
Mm.
that for? Like, are these actually four territories, or are these like different jobs, or does it just so happen that Elphaba went west and then set up her kingdom there, and that's why she's the Witch of the West? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I
it's
get
a
you.
little bit, and from what I've read, the Oz books get really weird and really detailed, and I have a feeling that's outlined there. I've just not read them, and I'm a little bit tempted to read them because apparently they are really weird and esoteric. And basically, the movies, none of the adaptations do them a lot of justice, just in terms of just batshit crazy they are. And I'm kind of a little bit curious now. But yeah, so like the Wicked Witch, I think a breath of fresh air, and just fun to watch. And she fits into the story, like she belongs in that story, right? Like, I think if the Wizard of Oz had started with what Wicked did and explained about how Glinda and Elphaba used to be friends, and then something happened. Like, you could have done this, right? You could have that could have been in the Wizard of Oz, right? Just in terms of runtime and scope and all of that, right? It could absolutely have been done, but I'm just not sure it would have improved the story because that's not really what that's about.
To be fair, when they did encounter each other, there was familiarity between the two. So it could be believable, obviously in Wicked 2 that they were friends. Just based on the way that they were talking about each other, and they would acknowledge each other and speak of each other in The Wizard of Oz. But I do hear what you're saying though.
Yeah, they clearly knew each other, right? But if you just take Wizard of Oz by itself, the implication is kind of that they have dealt with before.
Yeah.
That like Glinda is the defender of the innocent, and the Wicked Witch is kind of shows up doing evil, and that's just how it is. And the Munchkins celebrate the death of the Witch of the East, right? And that kind of, to me, shows that there has been a long time where they've lived under the Witch of the East, and she's oppressed them, and her being dead is something you should celebrate. Like, there's a very very clear subtext or implication there, right, about what kind of place that part of Oz was before Dorothy showed up, even if it's probably a bit rushed and it's not really reflected. Like, they don't look oppressed, right? It's still a colorful and bright and shiny town, and they seem healthy, and they're not being worked to death in some mine or something, right? So what exactly, like, how exactly the Munchkins were oppressed is not completely obvious to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of one of those things, but it's like a fantasy, like it's a fairy tale. Like, how much detail do we really need other than the Munchkins have been terrorized by the witch and now she's dead, and so on, right? So I don't think it's really a flaw in the movie. It's more like it makes me curious. And I think that is why there are more books, and that is why there are, all these other movies. Like, Wicked is not even the first one, right? There was this Oz movie like 15 years ago or something with James Franco as the wizard, which is kind of like in between Wicked and Wizard of Oz, where it follows the wizard coming to Oz and kind of encountering, like, he leads the Munchkins in some battle or something. It gets a little bit weird as well. But Oz kind of seems like it's not supposed to be a coherent place, but it feels a little bit like you could have just added a couple of lines to give it a little bit more context in terms of like what kind of place this is. Does the wizard rule over all of it? And if he rules over all of it, how does the Witch of the West tie into that, right? And doesn't she have her own kingdom because she seems to? Because when she dies, her minions celebrate her death, right? And they just throw away, the black armor, and underneath the pretty cool looking uniforms and armor, there are just people there. who seem to be her people. Like they have like the large noses and the green skin, and it feels a little bit like the Wicked Witch had conquered her own people, and had oppressed them, and then kind of used them to wage war on the rest of Oz. It's kind of what it looks like. But I don't know. Like it's all. It's not even that like that it hints at, like, it's not even like an iceberg thing where it hints at a few things, but your mind fills in most of it. It just feels like there's not a lot there, right? And it's not supposed to, because it's a children's fairy tale. But just me watching it, it makes me a little bit frustrated because I don't have a handle on what Oz is like. And then Wicked makes that worse, where we see more of it, but very little of it actually contributes. Like, we spend a lot of time showing things, but there's very few answers and there's very few puzzle pieces that are actually contributed, right? So Oz in general, to me, is just a big question mark. I think that's really only a problem if you spend more than one movie there or one book. If it's just like, if it's like Alice in Wonderland, where you go to this magical place and discover a bunch of things once, I think you don't really need this. But the more time you spend there, it's a little bit like the Star Wars universe as well, where if you only take one movie, you don't really need to see that much, right? You see 2 or 3 planets and you get like a basic idea of what the place is like. But the more time you spend there, the more blanks you have to fill in. And each blank you fill in is an opportunity for it to not make sense. And I have a feeling like
Yeah.
if you just leave it at Wizard of Oz, Oz is fine. But the moment you spend more time there and you go into prequels or sequels or whatever it is, it starts to unravel. At least that's what it seems like to me.
So I do agree in terms of like Oz, as you know, a world is very, is still pretty much a question mark, but it's normal because obviously it's a world that is spoken more of and revealed in more films. Because like you said, there was another film as well that was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So I don't think it's enough just to see it from one movie. But yeah, you are right about that.
I think there's at least 3 Wizard of Oz movies, like 2 more sequels, and I don't know. I've not seen them. I don't know how good they are. Like, I think that's probably a reason for why this is the big classic. And before we move on or wrap it up, I do have one more complaint about the witch, which is that her death is really lame. Right. So first of all, she abducts Dorothy and the dog from the haunted forest, right? And then she kind of does some villain monologuing, and then she sets, I think, Scarecrow's arm on fire, and Dorothy takes a bucket of water to put out the fire, and some of it splashes onto the witch, and she just melts. That's the end of her. If you are the Wicked Witch, why would you go within 100 meters of any water at all? Why even have that in your fortress?
I hear what you're saying, but one thing I will give them, it was unexpected because I forgot she died like that. So then when she died like that, I was like, oh, even though that was very anticlimactic, I was still like that. It caught me off guard because generally a lot of deaths that we see in movies is expected, but that one I didn't really expect because it was so, you're right, lame, but it was good lame.
I'm not even convinced by that, because, so first of all, Dorothy does it by accident. And then it's like we talked earlier about health and safety standards. Why is there any? It's a bit like staircases, like a staircase in which every step is a loaded gun. Like, why even allow this? It just makes zero sense. And it's not even like Dorothy tricks the witch into a place where there will be water. We talked earlier about how this breaks a lot of storytelling rules, and it somehow still works because it's a fairy tale about exploration and discovery and self-discovery. And that's kind of what it is all about. And so Dorothy maybe doesn't need a big character arc or whatever, or a big hero moment or something. But if you're building up this overbearing or like massively powerful villain, why do you give her such a lame weakness that comes out of nowhere? And why, like, this is like Chekhov's gun, right? Like, except the gun is just lying there and the villain left it there, and the hero
Yeah.
just puts it up and shoots the villain. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like, there's no, like, it's not an accomplishment by Dorothy in any sense of the word. It doesn't even rhyme with this idea of like the answer was within you anyway, because like she does not discover anything or learn anything that leads her to understand, oh, the witch is vulnerable to water, so let's go find some water. Like if she had tricked the witch into setting Scarecrow on fire, which gets kind of dark already, right? But let's just go with it. And that is why somebody brings some water, and that is why the witch is near water or something, right? It's, we don't, you know what I mean? This is not just a technicality about setup and payoff and character arcs and the heroic moment and all of that. It's actually how you make a compelling story, right? And I think this is the place where the story breaks all of those rules, and it's actually worse off for it. Because I just shrugged when I saw that, because for close to 2 hours, the witch had been built up as a big threat, and then she just dies out of nowhere. And it's not even established that she's staying away from water, right? Like when she comes to the Munchkin town, there's water all over the place, and none of the Munchkins just take a bucket and try to kill her. You know what I mean? Like she's powerless in that moment. Like why does like and maybe the answer is nobody knows about the water being the weakness, but also what I mean? Like this, it does not hang together at all. It's just a way to end the story, I think. And it does not even speak to this whole the answer was inside you all along, because that is not how Dorothy wins in the end. That is not how that is how she gets home, which also makes no sense, right? This whole idea that like the only reason she has the slippers is because Glinda put them on her so that the witch couldn't get to her or couldn't get to the slippers. And then the slippers are the way with which Dorothy gets back to Kansas. But this is not hers, right? Like this is not this is something that was given to her by accident. And it's not her accomplishment, and it's also not something that's innate to her. Right? It's not like the magic to get back home, like in order to get home you have to appreciate your home. You know what I mean? And once Dorothy gets to that point, she can just push herself home or something like that, right? Now it's like both the witch dying and the slippers I think makes zero sense, purely like on a logical way level, and also on a thematic level. And if there's any super fans listening, like let us know why this is good, because I like a lot about this as a story, and I can accept that like things that on paper, like a lot of the rules are broken here for good reason. And I think those are two places where the rules are not broken for good reasons, and the story is actually weaker because of it.
Yeah. At first, I tried to see if there was anything more to obviously the water, just her dying from water. But then I was trying to say maybe something to do with like holy water and Dorothy being pure, and then obviously purifying that holy water, and then and you know what I'm saying. I tried to give it that benefit of the doubt, but it didn't really give any signs that that was going to be the case. But then I did remember the shoes, and so maybe it had something to do with the shoes as well, which links to obviously purifying that holy water. Because a lot of the times they're saying you already could have got home. You know what I'm saying? It was within you. So I thought maybe that was a scene where, even though it was accidental, because she wanted to kind of like, well, no, she didn't even want to save the scarecrow by killing the witch. That was she even said it was an accident, so she just threw the water away, not knowing that the witch was standing there. Okay, yeah, so ignore me. So that was a complete accident. So there's not really much reasoning you can give behind that. And in terms of like the shoes, it's the whole plot with the whole shoes and Dorothy having the shoes. Yeah, I agree with that also. I was gonna ask, I forgot what the term is used when it comes to like the history behind things, right? Behind werewolves, witchcraft, and all of that. What's that term called that you use as well?
Depending on what you mean, it could be lore or folklore or
Folk.
mythology or
Yeah. I've been one of them, mythology, or I think it's law. I think it's mythology, but could the mythology have anything to do with that scene of the witch dying by the water?
yeah, like it's a little bit fairy tale logic, right? Like now that you mention it, there might be stories in which witches die by water. I'm not sure. It could be, but if that's the case, then that still leaves questions like why is there water anywhere near the witch?
True.
Like why does she not try to like why does she make it so easy? And then as a story, like shouldn't Dorothy discover this and then try to engineer a situation in which the witch has to be near water? Like you can imagine, like if this was like a movie that was made today, maybe she would like go to an island, like a little island on a lake, and then dare the witch to say like put the slippers on a rock, say here are the slippers, come and get them, and she has to go onto the lake. That means she's near water. You know what I mean? Like that's how you could do this, right? If you accept that, okay, witches can be killed with water because of folklore, fine, that's great. I'm totally on board with that. But then just as a story moment, there's something missing, and it appears to be pure coincidence.
Hmm. Nah, I'll agree.
All right, to wrap it up, any last words about the Wizard of Oz? And my big question is, none of us have children, right? But if you had children, if you had to entertain like a niece or nephew or somebody, like a 7-year old or 6-year old, would you show them the Wizard of Oz?
So overall, like I said, it was a nostalgia fest. I'm not really a big fan of musicals. However, this film's always gonna have a place in my heart because I resonate with it so much because I was the scarecrow at one point in time. In terms of would I show this to my family?
Sorry, did you ever find your brain?
Never found my brand. I hope so. But yeah, that was a good one. But in terms of would I show it to my family, that's a very good question. I am on the fence with this. I don't think so. You know what? It depends. If there's a conversation that triggers me to tell them that I was a scarecrow at a point in time, then yeah. But I don't think this is something which it depends on how old they were, but I don't think this is something that they'd resonate with.
Like 6 or 7.
Maybe, but I don't think so. But I just don't want to say yes just for the sake of it. I just don't think I would. But who knows? If it was on TV, if it was on TV, then yeah, maybe. Depending if it's Christmas or something. But
I'm thinking like it's like Christmas morning or after like the afternoon of Christmas Day or something, and there's like children around and they have to be entertained for 2 hours.
yeah.
Like, do you put on the Wizard of Oz? It's kind of my question.
But the reason why I'm very hesitant to say yes is because there's so like we have so many movies. There's so many movies out there, and I'm not trying to be too literal. I get it, but
It is a valid answer, right? Like,
yeah.
because why not? Why show them this as opposed to anything else?
Mm. Exactly. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, I don't want to just lie and say, yeah, I would. But I don't think I would. What about you?
So for me, I think this absolutely holds up. Like looking at this with completely fresh eyes, no nostalgia whatsoever. I was totally ready to say, look, this is one of those things that just does not hold up, and people are nostalgic for this because they've been watching this since they were 6. And if you're in that position and it makes you feel good because it reminds you of that time you watched this with your parents at age 6, that's totally valid. Nothing wrong with that. But even just as a story itself, I think it holds up. I think it's whimsical. I think it's fun. It's creative. I think the story has some issues with it. But if you're showing this to like a 6, 7 year old to keep them entertained, I would show them Star Wars first, and then this. I think this is absolutely holds up. This is absolutely a good, like an entertaining watch. And then as you get older, you can delve into the horror show that was the production or whatever, or you can like criticize the plot or whatever. But I think just as a fairy tale, this absolutely holds up.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining into today's discussion.
If you've gotten this far and you like what we do, please tell a friend. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
You heard it here first, guys. We'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye bye.